Hi,
Howdy.
Clint. How's it going?
I am super excited. It is going
You're
great.
super excited?
I am. I've been looking forward to this.
I'm really excited too. So, for those people who are just joining us, well, everybody's just joining us because it's our first episode. Welcome to This Is Fine, a podcast about resilience engineering in software and how it happens all the time, everywhere around us. We're going to try to make it easy for people to understand how to do resilience engineering in their orgs. Does that sound okay, Clint?
It does. It honestly brings up traumas. And
I'm so
that is what
excited
I
to
want
talk
to
about
do.
those.
That is what I
Yeah.
want to do. That's what is the genesis of this is like we're always talking about our little work traumas between, each other one on one at conferences at tables. I'm like, I think everybody needs to hear these things.
I do too. I do too. And I think that the thing is hearing about how much everybody else is struggling oddly makes us feel better, right? And then also hearing about how other people are finding success also makes us feel better. I would like us to be here for both sets of those conversations. We are a call in, a write in, a form in show. We have a Google form. You can find our website, which has a link to the Google form at thisisfinepod.com. So we've been soliciting. I went onto the old LinkedIn and I put a link to our forum on LinkedIn and a bunch of people wrote in. And so we have many episodes lined up with guests, but we're going to do the first one by ourselves to like give us some practice, get us in the swing of it. So my first question, well, I figured we could start off by talking about resilience engineering and like what we think resilience is. I don't know, is that a good way to start, Clint?
I think it is. We're in danger of getting a little unfocused, but that's one of the challenges I think that I've had since sort of stumbling into this world is I feel like it's really hard to talk about, like because it's counterintuitive. It's often interrupting people's like long held beliefs about how things should happen, and so every time I wade into it with someone who's not kind of in this community like you and I are, I have to like, okay, how much do I start with? And so I'm thinking about the audience of a podcast. Like some of them are going to be our people. They're going to be excited, but people who are just wandering in, like resilience kind of sounds like a pretty big deal, and it kind of is, but a lot of people don't know what it is. I'm curious, like, where do you start?
Well, I guess I started the reason that resilience engineering made sense to me in the first place when I first heard about it, which is, when I was tasked with looking at reliability as a problem at a job, I think we're going to have to do at previous job as code here. Um, I I looked at statistics of incidents. I looked at all sorts of things that various papers or things would tell me, oh, you should look at these things and, target these things. And none of it made sense. But when I went and talked to people about what they were doing and understood how they were approaching their on call shifts and understood what they were kind of going through in their day to day as engineers, that's when I started to make sense of like why things were the way they were. And resilience engineering is essentially just a like code for hey, you have incidents, hey, you have downtime, but you also have uptime. And it turns out that people are at the center of both of those things. And understanding how they approach their work is the right way to frame that. I'm thinking about an example of resilience in the wild that I have seen maybe in the last couple of months, right? Hmm. Actually, I can think of something, which is, well, at a job, we have a meeting. Meetings are not often sources of resilience, I don't necessarily think. But if there is a meeting where you can hear engineers talking to each other about their systems, and sharing dashboards that they're using and sharing struggles that they're having, with particular sets of dashboards, giving them the fidelity that they want into a particular problem. And then having other engineers chime in and say, "Oh, we think we know how to help solve that problem for you." I feel like that's being a place where we can, like, having a regular check-in where people are sharing those kinds of things, to me feels like an example of resilience. Like, people are learning about things together and sharing knowledge that wouldn't otherwise be out in the open.
Yeah. It's funny because one of the things I noticed in the last just like year, I mean, I've been doing this a long time. We haven't really introduced ourselves a little, but I mean, I'm in multiple decades at this point of operating systems at scale on the internet.
That's so wild.
It is kind of wild, right? I mean, I have a kid in college who wasn't born when I started. Like, it's been happening a long time, and it's changed a lot, and I've changed a lot. One thing I noticed in the last few years was that stuff that seemed obvious to me that I thought everybody knew, I'll just drop that little, like, oh, like every nine beyond, nines of uptime, right? This is like a big one that we hear. And that, like, going from 3 nines to 4 nines is as hard as going from 2 nines to 3 nines is.
Yes.
And like, you need a whole new org and a whole new culture and a whole new way of being. And I thought everybody knew that. And I thought VPs knew that. And I thought managers know that. And I thought my fellow engineers. And some of us intuitively know it, or we've seen it, or we've heard it. But a lot of people sit back and it's like, you just dropped a mind bomb. Like, what?
Yeah.
That's huge.
Which is, it's sort of funny though, right? Because the flip side of that is, like, you totally know there are people in front of whiteboards just going, I don't know, let's just add a 9 there.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. Let's get another 9. Let's go for it.
And you're sitting there and you're like, I have this lived experience for 2 decades, and I'm telling you, that's not a thing.
I was that person too, like very much like at the top of the Dunning-Kruger cliff, my first like big sysadmin job, like they were like, what's our uptime? And I'm like, what's uptime? And we figured it out, and we're like, oh my gosh, it's 99.1%. And we're down for hours and hours every month. And let's go to 3. And the ensuing like year of pain, I'm proud of it. Like, we did our best. And that's, I think, an essence of resilience is that adaptation that you do. You do with what you have in the moment, what makes sense to you. And hearing that finally, like, full circle, like 20 years in, when you started bringing me into the resilience, like giving that language and understanding, and like giving myself a break for making all those mistakes for all those years. Like, I sort of had been holding on to this, like, oh, I was so dumb. Like, I was so dumb back then. And now I'm like, yeah, I was dumb, and that's okay. I'm still dumb. Like,
Yeah, I'm still dumb too.
It's gonna, yeah. Like, and what's important is to actually talk about how we were dumb, and just go, okay, that's what the brains had in them that day. And now they have new stuff in them. And we're going to make sure everybody knows that new stuff and embraces it. And we talk about it. That's, to me, what is resilience, is not going like, let's hide from all that stuff. Let's hide from our mistakes. Let's just put them up there. But then also, let's think about all that cool stuff we came up with on the fly that worked, and that and then later in the ensuing months, we built all this safety and resilience on top of it. Naturally, it happens whether you talk about it or not. That's been the really nice virtuous cycle that I feel like now there's a community to talk about that. And it's not the sysadmin community who's like in the trenches all the time, but it's like those of us who are popping our heads up and going like, there's more here. There's a lot more.
Yeah. Speaking of still being dumb, can I tell you about a couple of dumb things that I've done in the last month?
Yes, please.
Okay. So one of them is, well, I mean, it was a smart thing to do, but I felt really dumb while I was there, which is I went to the Resilience Engineering Association's 20th anniversary invite only discussion conference. That was like, it's basically like they've got like 20 people in a room and they're like, you're going to write the book for the next 20 years of resilience engineering. So I've been roped into doing a couple of things maybe in a book that's going to be released about resilience engineering. And mind you, this is the Resilience Engineering Association. So for folks who are totally new to this world, there is an association for resilience engineering. It's like multidisciplinary. So it's not just like software nerds. Like there were only 3 software nerds in Portugal. Like the rest of the people were like from banking, from healthcare, from like energy, from all these other different places. And it was really fascinating to be around so many smart people, lots of people who work in academia and write papers about this stuff and do full-time research on it. It was also very intimidating. It was very easy to be like, I don't know anything. Why am I here again? I had a really fun time though. Everybody was super nice. And I'm like, I came away being pretty excited about what we could potentially do to help people understand more about resilience engineering, like in the next 20 years. The other stupid thing I did, kind of coinciding with that,
That didn't
is
sound very stupid, by the way.
okay.
That sounded actually pretty smart.
Okay. Well, I felt really dumb while I was there, but it was really fun. It was really cool. The other stupid, maybe amazing thing, maybe both, that I've done is I've started a specific foundation for resilience engineering and software. So we filed for our 501c3. I've got an EIN with the IRS. Like it's very exciting. We have a Slack and we're going to start taking memberships. So by the time this podcast is released to the public, we will have a webpage that you can go to and sign up to become a member. The Resilience in Software Foundation, RISF. I'm very excited.
I'm glad you're excited because I think signing up to run a bureaucracy does kind of sound dumb.
Yeah.
Like I've definitely done similar things, but not to this level. And I saw that it happened, and I was sort of like, "Thank God Colette wants to do that." Like,
I mean, you know, running a software organization of like 40 or 50 folks versus like, you know, being on the board of directors for a foundation that ostensibly just has a Slack, right, where we talk about stuff and maybe has a conference. I would love that at some point. That's what we're signing up for. We're gonna try to do it. So yeah,
I'm very
that's my
excited
news.
about that because, like, we've had little fits and starts of that the last couple of years, and they've been some of the like happiest and biggest professional growth moments for me to be able to attend. Like there was that LFI conf in Denver, and like there was we kind of like took over SRECon a little bit last year,
Yeah.
and it felt like it's happening, and then it kind of stopped for a little
Fizzled.
bit.
Yeah.
It fizzled, and I think this is normal. I think this is
Yeah.
like a normal way that these communities get going. Is it's hard to figure out who can take the reins, and finally you all just like we're doing it. Like this, there's a thing, there's a Slack. I'm just hopeful that like that momentum continues. This is kind of a pivotal moment, and I think all communities go through this one too, which is, will you make it through the first 2 years?
Yeah. I don't know the answer to that, but I really hope that we do. Um, I'm willing to put in some decent amount of energy and, you know, do annoying things like find a membership SaaS platform and file tax paperwork. I'm willing to do that. So I hope other people will take my lead and join me in my stupidity.
I've seen some of the smarter folks from our community who I feel like I'm in awe of. get involved really quick.
Yeah.
And that's given me a feeling like this is different. Like this feels like the momentum is going to sustain for a while.
Well, fingers crossed. And I suppose I'll keep everybody updated as we do more episodes. Any news from your world? Any exciting things? Any fun life updates?
I mean, the journey I've been on in the last year has been interesting, right? Went through a layoff last year, which was the second job in a row being laid off, which is kind of interesting. But like no ill will towards either company, very much like a growth mindset coming into it, in part because of what I've been doing all this time. Like you realize like companies, they've got to run, they've got to do what they've got to do. I can be a little bit annoyed sometimes when, then you see them, on their yacht, but either way, like I took a big pivot kind of backwards into the, like deeper into the trenches.
Yeah.
And, I kind of been enjoying it. Like,
I'm so glad. Can I just say, like, okay, for anybody watching, Clint and I have worked together for the last 11 years of our professional lives. I think
crikey.
Of the last 11 years, Clint, I think only maybe 2 or 3 of those I was not working with you.
Yep.
And every single job I've had in the last 11 years, you have eventually joined me at.
Yeah, I kind of follow you around like a puppy. I love it.
But it's not even like, for folks, it's not even that I'm hiring him necessarily, right? So like I basically am just the person who introduces the organization to the drug that is Clint Byam. And then they get hooked. You know what? I'm going to just say it. Fuck Daniel Ek and his yacht or whatever he has. I will take working with Clint Byam for 11 years over a yacht, personally.
Thank you. That means a lot to me.
That's worth more than a yacht to me, Clint. So I'm glad you're hanging out.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because we're actually about to head back to where we met, kind of.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we met at HP, but now we're...
Yeah. Fair. Mm-hmm. Fair. But either way, like that, going back into the trenches, I was a little nervous about it. Like my journey was like I was heading into like the tool space and like way up in open source land, way away from everybody who was feeling all this pain in the incidents. And it felt like I wasn't being me. Like because I do feel like I bring a lot of like calm to the storm, and I'm one of those people who, like, I remember we did that the training for incident response recently. I'm trying to remember what the company was called, but it was basically run by firefighters. And the way they were like, that's an emergency, this is an incident. And I was like, yes, that's how I've been trying to do things and trying to teach people to do, just naturally as a child who grew up in a high stress environment. Like that's natural and normal for me. And I wasn't doing that. So I've been doing that, and it feels good to like join an incident call and know that it's worthwhile to just stop everything and slow things down, find out if there's an incident command, if there's not, take command immediately and start to bring order to what is a very stressful moment. Yeah. That feels like me being me. And that's something I want to share, and I want to like level other people up on, because it's actually not that hard. It's just important that you do it and you learn.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Speaking of incidents, should we do our first question?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay, good. So again, if you have a question that you would like to ask us, we have a Google form, and you can come ask us a question. We also have an email address. We have a phone number. Our email address is thisisfine.softwarepodcast@gmail.com. You can email us there, or go to our website, thisisfinepod.com, and you'll find the link to our Google form there. All right, so the first question that came in, we're going to answer it. How do you politely ask executives slash senior members of a company to step away from an incident or during analysis, as that can add additional cognitive load, pressures, and sometimes even misdirect people?
Got to take a breath on this one.
Got a big cringe emoji there.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like we both have been through this multiple times. Some together, some not.
Have I ever
I'm
been that executive?
not in any of my incidents,
Oh, good.
but it's entirely possible that you have, right? Because even knowing, what you're doing, I think this is the number one thing. I was just talking at Agile 2024 a couple months ago, trying to bring some new folks into the incident analysis community. That went great, by the way. Side note.
Yay.
And a big message that they really hadn't heard, that I don't even know if the resilience community fully agrees with me on this one, but it's something that I've believed for a long time, is that part of the reason we need to look at incidents closely and that we need to take this methodical approach is that we also need to build empathy for the people on what I was calling the blunt end. There's that model of like blunt end, sharp end, like the folks holding the pokey thing, not being the pokey thing. And so a lot of what I try to bring to these moments, which are really stressful, is like, what are they trying to do right now? Like, what's driving them? Because from our angle, we've got databases and load balancers and users to think about. They have investors, right? They have much higher ups. They have C levels. Whoever's on them, or even maybe customer C levels, whoever's on them, like, we need to give a little empathy for them, but at the same time be firm. It's sort of like dealing with children. Like, I don't mean to be like disrespectful in saying that,
No,
but
it's like I respect my children, but still I have a method of dealing with them, right? I think that has to be true here, right? You can still respect someone, but have a way that you have to manage them. By the way, for anybody who doesn't know, blunt end and sharp end are very common terms in the RE community. Sharp end sort of means at the operator edge. So that would be like in the software industry, a sharp end person would be like somebody who's on call, somebody who's responding to an incident, somebody who's, writing software or deploying it somehow. And then blunt end usually refers to people in management positions. So people who are not sort of at that operating edge, but are more in the like decision making rooms up in the ivory tower somewhere. Hopefully not, but like sometimes that happens, right? And I think you're totally right, Clint. Like everybody serves somebody is how I like to put it. Like even a CEO of a company serves the board, serves the investors, serves private equity, who the fuck ever. They have their responsibilities too, right? And so if they're coming into your chat or commenting on something, I think it's important to first understand or at least empathize that they have their own pressures and their own things. Do you ever can I tell you a secret that I found out when I arrived at my current job, which is that there was somebody who was running a shadow, like every major incident that happened, they would run a shadow secret channel where they would rope in all of like the bigwigs and they would keep them updated there. And so they were doing this but they were like not an official comms person. They were not, right. They were just like doing that. And when I arrived, I was told that this was happening. They were no longer there. And I actually decided to not do it. And I did that because, see, I did that because I did not want, first of all, I didn't want to break my back doing that and have it be like this invisible work that nobody ever saw. Because then it's like, if I leave or if I'm sick that day or if I'm on vacation with no phone service and there's a major Sev 1, suddenly there's no adaptive capacity in the organization to like manage around that, right? Because what I'm doing is totally invisible. But I knew it would become a problem. Like I intuitively understood that it was going to bring some pain forward before we decided kind of what to do about it. And I feel like we're kind of still deciding what to do about it. Like there's been some experimenting with different roles or like who's in charge of what. I think we need to like have it be an official role. And I would respond to this person by saying, like, do you have a role who, like, their responsibility is to communicate around internally in your organization to the right people when a major incident is happening? Have you ever seen that?
I have seen the shadow approach. That is
Mm.
not the first time I've heard that exact approach, by the way. In fact, one of my first like real high scale on call jobs where I wasn't at the beginning of the Dunning-Kruger curve, I was starting to climb back up out of the valley of disillusionment. That was very much the norm and was very much like on day one, like, okay, you're going on call, like talk to this person. They will keep everybody else off of your calls. And I sort of accepted it at the time. Like, oh, nice. Like I thought that's kind of nice.
They're
And
protecting you,
they were absolutely protecting. Like they
protecting
were,
you.
and they were a manager. Like they were just a regular line manager, but that was the role they had. That was the adaptation they had for this problem. And still, occasionally, really big incidents, management would still sort of be like, "That's not enough for me. I want it from the horse's mouth," and they would join. And I had my first experience with this, where you have a VP, a lot of people underneath them, a lot of power, and not the nicest person coming in demanding time estimates, right? Demanding that things be done quicker. And I wasn't equipped for it, for sure. That same manager actually joined the call as well. I think somebody else might have had them come in and talked that VP into leaving
Yeah.
very eloquently. I wish I remembered the whole strategy that they used, but it was sort of this empathetic, like, hey, I know, like, this is a big one. We need them on it.
Yeah.
What is interesting is in the 10 minutes that took, a new call was spun up and the responders moved to it. And so, like, they didn't even notice that by the time he had
By the time
gotten
he
rid
was
of that
gone,
person,
like, the
it was
action had
just
moved
me.
elsewhere.
I was like kind of in the command role and one other engineer. All the other responders who were actually fixing the problem had already, they knew as soon as that person joined, they knew this is not going to go well. And so that's the adaptation. And I think this creates so many problems,
Yeah.
right? It creates this big, like blunt and sharpened animosity that's what I'm trying to counter with that empathy is like, before all this happens, let's develop a model where we understand that they need to know. And I think you mentioned it, like the role of like external liaison or whatever you call it. It feels a little like those roles, when you read them on paper and when you do the training, they feel amazing, right? They're like, oh yes, we're going to have somebody running this role and this is going to solve that problem. In the trenches, I'd love to hear your impression too, if like whether people tell you this as well. From my perspective, it feels like it adds so much gravity to the incident to be like, we need all these things right now, and a lot of folks will avoid it. It's like it's the same as the severity question. Is like,
Yeah.
oh, this is probably actually a Sub-Zero, like that hurts, you know. Whereas my MO in that is the moment someone says, is this a incident severity 1? Yes. Just take it all the way up to the top. Like, you'll attract attention, but you'll also get infrastructure for it, and you won't feel so silly going like, I need an external liaison or I need a scribe. Because
And
it's
if
like,
it's
well, this is
not
serious.
that, like if it's like what I see a lot too is people getting paged for something where it's like, oh, that's not us, or oh, this isn't really a step one, like, but I got paged. And anytime I've seen that, it's okay. It's okay. Nobody's going to be like, everybody that I know that's been on call or even gotten woken up in the middle of the night has been like, hey, it's okay. Like, nobody thinks that you want to page everybody and like disturb them for nothing, right? It's okay to call us F1. Um, I think that's the scary part for people though, is they worry that they're gonna bother a bunch of people and get a bunch of people, disrupted from their daily work for nothing. Um, yeah. So how to politely ask, I'm going to go back to the question, how to politely ask executives or senior members of the company to step away. I think the first thing, if I could summarize what this person that eloquently did that on the call, Clint, probably said, it was something like, hey, I understand that you are here because you have a problem that you are trying to solve. This is not the right place to solve that problem because people need this space to be able to do high input work, like highly stressful, high throughput, high communication throughput work with one another. And this is not going to help them get their work done. And I know that you want to get this resolved as soon as possible. So let's take this to another channel somewhere else, and I'll make sure that, you get the information that you need. That's how I would approach it, right? And then
Yeah,
I
and
think,
that is, yeah. I think the word you were looking for was bandwidth too, like
yeah, sorry,
specifically
high bandwidth.
high bandwidth is the thing that you're doing when you're calling an incident, is you're like putting up a flag and saying like, send all the comms through this narrow point right here, and that bandwidth is precious because it has to be timely and clear, because the clock is ticking,
Yeah.
right, and the money is going out the drain, and
Every second
that's
counts,
usually,
as they say on the bear. Yeah.
every second counts. I love that, by the way. I feel like those memes, I haven't used them enough, but that does feel like Michelin star restaurant is like a 4 nines deployment, right?
It's like a Sub-Zero incident, like all fucking night.
Right. No, that's, I think like a dropped fork is like a Sev 1 there, right? And then like the 3 Michelin star, that's 5 nines, right? That's like the mythical beast that barely exists. But either way, like having the conversation about, like, you don't want to be talking about money in an incident call for sure, but with it in mind, like understanding that that person's coming because they know the money is going out the drain, and that they feel that way more than we do on the sharp end. We definitely are going to feel some stuff. Like we know it intuitively, but we're actually on the sharp end, we're far from that.
Yep.
So that just understanding that and being like, we are working on plugging the drain. Like we will send this person to communicate. That's another thing I've seen work well, is just making sure they know that a person who's in the call is going to keep communicating with them. Or that there's a place where there's going to be frequent updates. And that's where like that, not just the external liaison, but like that scribe role that we haven't talked about much in this call, but like where you have somebody listening and all they're doing is just like condensing it and giving it to the rest of the org in some form, some cadence. It can be a massive help to not only this problem, but after the fact, like when people come asking what took so long, you'll get that question. And that's kind of in this question too, right? It's not just about the incident, but in the analysis, having those notes that weren't done by all the people who were busy using the high bandwidth communication. That to me was like a big level up for me, even just coming to this most recent org. Like at previous ones, I never really had this role. I didn't really know what it was about. I had never had it described to me. Yeah. And seeing it in action the first time, I was like, where has this been? Like, I always want to have somebody who's just listening and typing. It's so helpful.
Yeah, for sure. Well, dear question writer, I hope we answered your question well, and you at least got some good stories out of it. Again, if you would like to ask us a question, you can find us at thisisfine.softwarepodcast@gmail.com or thisisfinepod.com. Write it in, ask us your questions. We're going to do like a few of these based on the level of questions we got when I first posted the form on LinkedIn, but we might not do any more if we don't get a lot of questions. So, write in as a way of telling us that you love us and you want us to keep going.
You make me sad. Send questions. We need to keep doing this,
or we'll sit here and cry.
Yeah, we need this therapy session to continue.
Awesome. Next episode, we've got 2 more episodes lined up that I'm pretty excited by. Clint, have you seen my prep for these episodes?
I have, and I literally jaw drop.
Oh,
Like,
wow. Okay.
what? This is happening?
So, episode 2, Lions, Tigers, and Shallow Metrics. Oh my. Special guest, Vanessa Huerta Granda. Super excited to have her on to talk about metrics. And then episode 3, does software really need safety? Our special guest is going to be John Allspaw.
Jaw
The
drop.
father of, I was going to say grandfather, but he's not old enough to be a
You're
grandfather.
gonna get a message about
He
this.
would
Careful.
he would send me a terrible Slack message if I said that. The father of resilience engineering and software, John, has agreed to join us. I'm very excited about that episode. So, friends, stay tuned. All right. See you next time.